Dear chess friends, I am totally baffled with what's happening right now in the chess world. I think the entire online chess community, the entire chess world is absolutely in a state of shock right now. What's going on? There is an anonymous grandmaster playing online on chess.com, and he just played a mini match with a very strong grandmaster, Daniel Naroditsky, who's in fact also a very well-known YouTuber, content creator, and a very respected grandmaster above all. So what is happening? So far, nothing strange, right? But this anonymous grandmaster with the handle of Fisu or Faisu, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. He is playing under the Brazilian flag, but we know that that doesn't mean anything. Can also be a fake flag being connected to your account. In any case, he is playing with the white pieces and black pieces, a mini match against a strong grandmaster. And in every game, he's playing in the following style. Let's say he's playing with the black pieces. Naroditsky opens the game with 1e4. He plays the move a5, and then white goes d4. You're thinking, why on earth is a grandmaster playing the move a5? And then, even more shocking, is his next move, rook a6. He is just voluntarily giving up the exchange, sacrificing material on move 2 already. White is taking it, and after knight takes a6, he just starts the game. And now you think, okay, he's maybe crazy, he's drunk, he's doing whatever in front of his screen. He's enjoying himself, but definitely it's absolutely bizarre. But the most shocking thing is that he's even crushing Naroditsky in a lot of games after that. And not only with the black pieces, he also opens the game when he's playing with the white pieces himself. He plays here also the move 1a4. And in that case, he's just doing the same thing. In this video, I'm going to show you two amazing games, two of the most amazing blitz games I have seen maybe ever, maybe only this year. I'm not sure, you can judge for yourself. But in any case, I'm not going to say that you should play this yourself, but it's amazing to see that there is chess beyond any opening theory. You can just play basically anything nowadays and create something very cool on these 64 squares. Well, here we go. You just only have to hit the subscribe button to please me, and then, well, you can even consider making a small donation via PayPal. So far, I've received some very nice gifts, so appreciation to all of you who's supporting the channel. But here we go. 1a4 played by Faisu. Naroditsky played in one of these games the move e5. Logical move to play for the center. And here, rook a3. Just capture with a bishop. And white captures back with a knight. Why can you ever have any sort of compensation for the material disadvantage? Black played the move d5. And here, b3. This is what Faisu has been playing in most of his games. So the idea is that after knight c6, he puts the bishop on this diagonal. This should become one of white's best pieces, because black no longer has this dark squared bishop. So probably there are some possibilities on this long diagonal. But for now, black is also just occupying the center. So black is in great shape. Knight f6. g3. Also the other bishop will come to the long diagonal. Castling kingside. Bishop g2. Rook e8, just supporting your center. Looks just great still. But for now, all the files are still closed. So that means that there is no interaction with the rooks and white's pieces here yet. So white goes e3. Now bishop comes with tempo to g4 to hit the queen. Very logical move. And now look at this. Queen a1. The rook is no longer there. The queen goes into the corner and sets up a battery with the bishop, hoping to be able to cause some damage on this long diagonal. And well, here there are different ways of playing. There's nothing forced here. There are a lot of options for both sides. Just some more options for black having this material. Plus, I would consider just moving the queen and then get the rook into the center, something like that. But Naroditsky very understandably wants to open up the center, because white's king is still there, and imagine you're gonna take, black is gonna take back with a pawn, and the white king is in the fire line. So white is not going to cooperate. Played here the move h3, attacking the bishop on g4. And in one of these games, Naroditsky just dropped back with the bishop to f5, which is a reasonable move. But he also played in one of these games pawn takes e3, which is also understandable because the bishop cannot be taken. If you do so, it's queen takes d2 with check. The pawn supports the queen. King f1, queen takes f2 is checkmate. Don't do that. It's just plain wrong. So after pawn takes e3, white should not ignore the threat and recapture with the pawn. So bishop is still under threat. Now the bishop goes back to f5. And here white continues with its development. The knight comes in to f3, putting pressure together with these pieces on this diagonal against that pawn on e5. But here, knight b4 is played. White has to think about that pawn on c2, which is under attack by both the knight and the bishop. Okay, knight on a3. It's standing there at the side of the board. It's still defending the pawn. But white is not going to take the pawn on e5. Instead, he's playing for piece activity, castling kingside, getting that king out of the center, and the rook is looking for tactical opportunities on this f-file. Knight takes c2 played, knight takes, bishop takes, so black is capturing a valuable pawn. But here, white takes with the bishop on e5. So finally, this diagonal is getting more and more open, more pressure here. Maybe ideas sometimes to take on f6 to ruin the pawn formation on the king side. But first, black goes back with the bishop to e4. So I think there are ideas to take on f3 at some point and be able to take the pawn on d2, as the knight is an important defender. So what does white here? Play the move bishop c3. Bishop comes back, defends the pawn. And okay, black is still doing great, but you see, now the diagonal has been opened. There is some long-term pressure against black's kingside. Not only the knight is suffering a bit, also the pawn on g7. Black goes for the move knight h5, so the knight is no longer threatened to be taken. It defends the pawn, it hits the pawn on g3, but white goes for g4 to attack the knight on h5. Knight g3, attacking the rook goes to f2. Defends the pawn on d2 as well, and all of a sudden white is threatening to take on g7 with the bishop. So black play the move f6, and now white goes for the move g5, undermining that pawn on f6. So that if you ever take, there is bishop takes g7, and look at this black king. It's totally ripped off here. It's no longer defended by its own pawns. This is incredibly dangerous. So instead, there followed the move bishop takes f3, eliminating the knight. But white just takes back with the bishop. Think that maybe it was hoping that the rook would take, but then it's knight e2 with a check, and you can eliminate that dangerous bishop on the long diagonal. So it's indeed much better to take with the bishop. Sometimes the rook can come over to the g-file to hit the knight, and indirectly the pawn on g7 and the king on g8. What should black do? It's not really clear to me. In the game there followed pawn takes g5, but there is bishop takes g7. No immediate threats, but you're just one move away from just going somewhere with the bishop and threaten to infiltrate there with the queen on g7. Look at this, queen d7 played, attacking the bishop on g7, but now the bishop comes in to h6, and it's not about this pawn on g5. But what is white really contemplating here? Well, the queen on d7 is still an important defender, so queen g7 doesn't work yet, but white will try to deflect the queen. If black, for instance, would play the move knight f5 to hit the bishop, to defend the g7 square, there is bishop to d5 with check, and the king can't go anywhere. All these squares have been covered. And if you do take with the queen on d5, the only thing white still needs to do is eliminate that remaining defender. Rook takes f5 and white is winning. Queen takes f5 is met by queen g7 with checkmate. And if you play anything else, let's say the queen goes back to d7 to guard this square, the simplest move is just queen f6. And look now how white managed to totally dominate the center and the king side. There's nothing you can do against rook takes g5 with mate to follow. So knight f5 cannot be played. In the game there followed the move knight e4, counterattacking this rook on f2. But white is not going to move that rook away. They follow the move bishop g4, attacking the queen. And where should the queen go to? The queen doesn't have a good square to maintain control over that mating threat on g7. So here, look at this. Black just resigned. Daniel Naroditsky resigned after 23 moves after this rubbish opening. If you move the queen to e7, for instance, there is bishop e6, bang! Like you're giving a check and the king can't go anywhere. If you take with the queen, it's queen g7 with checkmate again. Absolutely amazing game. And as I said, it's a rubbish opening. It cannot be good. But still, you see that as long as the black rooks, they remain out of play, there's still something to play for. With the minus exchange, you have always this pressure on the long diagonal. This was the first game I wanted to show you. Now, the second game is even getting better. So let's see. Also here, a4 was played and black played the move e6 in this game. But there is rook a3 again. Bishop takes, knight f6, b3, castling kingside, bishop b2, d5. White is just playing all these standard moves he always wants to do in a blitz game, just to get these moves quickly on the board. So double fianchetto again. This time black spends more time getting the pawn to e5. So not really bad, but okay. There was no need to play e6 at the very start. In any case, after e3, here e4 is played. So the knight cannot be developed to f3. Pawn covers that square, but at the same time, you're voluntarily opening up the diagonal for that bishop on b2. White played h3. So this is already somewhat different, that you're controlling the g4 square. So black cannot develop the bishop to g4. c5, knight e2 played, knight c6, and here again the queen comes to a1 with pressure. Against that knight, sometimes you can think about trading off the bishop for that knight and play for some sort of positional compensation. But I think that, let's say, if black plays something like bishop e6, which was not played in the game, I think white's idea, in fact, here is to play a move like g4. And again, I'm not going to prove that white is better here. I don't believe in it. I think white's pieces are too bad. But there is some idea behind white's play. As the knight is on its way to g3, you're ready to castle, maybe to play f3, to activate the rook on this file. You can kick with the move g5, the knight away from f6, as the knight on g3 will cover the h5 square, and after that the pawn on g7 is in trouble. And how is black ever going to do something with that extra rook? Well, of course, Naroditsky also understood the potential dangers of his position, and therefore he again played the move d4, trying to cut off this bishop on b2. But here's pawn takes d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, white. Okay, center is open, but at least he gets a pawn for the exchange. But the knight comes in to e5. White castles here. So the king is relatively safe. But black played the move knight f3. With a check, trying to clarify the situation in the center. If you do take with a knight and after a pawn takes, bishop takes, I think black's idea had been here to take with the bishop on h3 and hit the rook. And okay, it's a complicated position, but still there are ideas for white to try to improve the position, getting the minor pieces to the center. There are some central pawns. This is what happened a lot in this mini match. You can look up their games on chess.com, by the way, and you will see a number of games in which white was even, not white, but also with the black pieces, that Fai Su was an exchange or even two exchanges down and got ample compensation with in the form of these nice pawn formations. So very, very interesting concept. But here, Fai Su didn't play the move knight takes f3. Played king h1, but giving black the opportunity to take the pawn on d2. But look at this, guys. This is absolutely amazing. What's going to happen in the next couple of moves? Fasten your seatbelts. Rook d1, attacking the knight on d2. But the knight doesn't want to go away because there will probably follow some sort of nasty discovered attack on the queen. So e3 is played to defend the knight, and the idea is that if you take the pawn, probably one of these knights will come into e4. They will support each other, and white's king is also more vulnerable. Now the pawn is no longer on f2. So instead of taking the pawn, knight c4 is played. You're challenging both the pawn on e3 and the knight on d2. Knight takes c4 was played, b takes c4. White will not win the prize for the most beautiful pawn structure. This is just looking terrible, but we are looking at the dynamics of this position, as white's pieces are incredibly active. Black captures the pawn on f2, is not afraid of any sort of discovered attack on the queen. But look now, knight e6. The knight as well as the rook are both attacking the queen on d8. And there are even plans for white to take on g7 next, followed by taking on f6. But what should black do? Well, honestly, if I would be playing black here, I'm a coward. I'm just giving back the material. I would take with the bishop that knight. And after rook takes d8, I would take back with the rook. And I'm thinking, okay, I have two rooks for the queen and the beautiful pawn. And I don't think white is having any serious attacking chances here. So that looks very convincing. But queen e7 was played. And now it is this move. Knight takes g7, guys. What an amazing idea. So you're sacrificing the knight. And I guess that the idea is that if you are ever going to take with the king, there can follow a move like rook f1. With the idea to wrap up the pawn on f2. And this pin is just so incredibly annoying. There are still ways probably to deal with it, but things are not simple at all. And look at this. After knight takes g7, black didn't fancy going for this line, but played instead the move queen e1 check. So his idea is that if you take with the rook, you're capturing with the pawn, forcing the exchange of queens, and at the end of the day, well, black is just two rooks up, completely hopeless. So the only move is to bring up your king to h2, ignore the threat, but now everything is hanging. The rook on e8, the knight on f6, but black continues with the promotion of this pawn. f1 queen, threatening. Checkmate here on g1. Bishop takes f1, and black moves away. The queen with tempo, queen f2 check, also defending the knight again, bishop to g2. And this is very tricky, guys, because rook f1 again is coming, and knight takes e8, and knight on f6 is hanging. White is not completely helpless here. What should you do? Well, you want to play a move like rook e2 to continue your own mating attack, but it will run into this move, rook d8. And if you take with your king, the knight, there's bishop takes f6, and if you do take with the queen, there is rook g8 with a deflection motive. You can still take, but then this queen takes f6. Once again, it's two rooks versus a queen. Not clear at all. Amazing tactical ideas were happening. And, well, in fact, in this line after rook e2, rook d8, king takes, bishop takes, you can't really go somewhere. If you go king g6, there will be rook g8 as an intermediate check, while if you go right away to h6, there is even queen c1. And it's the black king who actually can easily can get mated here. So let's get back. After bishop g2, b4, bring the rook to e2. There follows bishop takes h3, threatening checkmate as well. White needs to react to it. He doesn't have a good check, got to take with the king. But now it's rook e2, threatening to take on g2. And here you see that the bishop, since it's no longer standing in the way, the rook is now able to cover the back rank. So white got to defend here. Rook g1, and there follows knight to e4. That's a nice idea. Threatening checkmate on g3. If you do take the knight, it's queen h2, king g4, rook takes e4. If you go back to f3, it's checkmate on e2. If you go upwards with your king, I think you can just take the pawn and look at this king. It's no longer counting on the support of any of its pieces. There are no pawns. This is game over. Black will win it. So instead, Fai Su, look at what he's doing here. Instead of taking, he played knight h5, defending against the mating threat. Absolutely insane idea. Queen f5, check. And here you gotta be very careful. Your knight is hanging. If you do play king h4, it's queen g5, king h3, and you take the knight, it's checkmate. So white forced to play here the move g4 to attack the queen. The knight comes to f2 with check. The king moves to h2. Knight takes g4 with another check. But here, king to g3. And all of a sudden, there are no good checks here. If you if you give a check here on f2, probably the knight can just be taken and the game goes on. Far from clear. If you take on h5, probably bishop f3 is going to be played. Rook is hanging, knight can be taken. And if there's no mate, you may even think about a counterattack against the black king. So instead, after king g3, black went for rook a e8 with a simple plan of bringing up the rook to e3. But the game goes on with the move king h4. Absolutely insane idea. So what is White contemplating here? Probably thinking about moves like getting rid of this bishop and try to create a check against the king. So black is careless here, or at least he didn't realize what the threat is. Play the move h6, threatening some check on g5, and then you can imagine that it will be checkmate in a few moves. Knight f6, check. If you do take with this knight, there is this main idea for white. It's bishop a3. With a discovered check, you're winning the queen, and white will win the game also after that. But after knight f6, king goes to f8. But rather than taking any material, you do first give a check with your bishop. This is beautiful. You're giving a check, and not only that, you're also opening up the path for your queen. So in your dreams, you're seeing the white queen landing on h8. If you block with the rook, probably it's knight takes g4. Everything is under control. There may follow one or two checks, but there's no mate. And white is in fact threatening also to give checkmate on h8 or even take the rook on e7. So that's not going to help black at all. Black played king g7, but knight h5, double check with the queen and the knight. Daniel Naroditsky resigned here. You gotta move the king. When it's like a double check, you cannot block with any of your pieces. You have to move your king then, and that will be met by queen g7 with checkmate. What a roller coaster of a game. Absolutely madness on the chessboard. Well, let me know, please, in the comments, what do you think of this game? Also hit the subscribe button, guys. I would really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Who is this Fai Su? We will hear more about him in the near future. What do you think? Is it Magnus Carlsen playing on the secret account? Maybe another top online blitz player like Hikaru, or maybe Gukesh? I don't know, any rumors. I'm just gossiping now. Is it maybe a Brazilian grandmaster we have not heard of yet? I'm very curious to hear more from this player, and let me know, what do you think of this opening concept of sacrificing your rook voluntarily, the exchange sacrifice on move 2. It's one of the most rubbish openings I've ever seen, but still, there is some logic behind it. Well, now, I should stop now, guys. Thanks for watching. I will see you very soon again. Bye-bye.